What In-N-Out does is they do a burger patty, two things of cheese, another burger patty, and then another 2 cheeses on top. So you have like this big mishmash of cheese, which just becomes too calorically dense. It just becomes a mess.
Okay.
But if you throw another patty on top, it gives you enough meat to sort of mix in with all the cheese, and it works. Put it that way.
You see this? Can you read that? I know that's
that's what an actual Flying Dutchman is. It's like a boat, right? It's named after a boat. And the owner,
whoops.
So the owner of the owner of In-N-Out used to get Flying Dutchman because he would actually say, I'm here all the time and I need a snack, and the best snack is just taking some patties and smushing some cheese between it and just eating it like that. And so he always ate them like that because he wanted to keep his calories down. So it became a thing for the owner, that he liked it. Like he liked it like that. So it's his invention.
Yeah.
And I don't know who the owner of In-N-Out is, but they deserve some credit. It's a good man.
You get that sense like this is still like it's a big business, but it still ran like a small business.
Yeah.
If like there's still some sense of it's the cleanest. The people seem alert. They seem a little more together when they're talking to you. Maybe they're staffed appropriately. I don't know. They really do set a higher bar than every other place.
I wanted to say happy holidays to you, buddy.
Hey, happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
And I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
Have you gone Christmas shopping yet? You get everything?
Well,
we're recording this a couple days before Christmas. We're releasing it on Christmas, so we can talk about these things with nobody finding out. You get everything for the kids and all that stuff?
Yeah, we really pared back for the kids this year. We have done the whole like
you will own nothing and you will like it. Is that what you told them?
Yes.
Klaus Schwab them?
Yes, we did. Yes. We've done the whole thing. I've done the whole thing where on the 11th hour.
Santa Claus at all? No, your Randy's too old, right?
No, you know what? I gave Rebecca the look this year, like, hey, do we break it down? And she's like, don't ruin it. Not yet.
But Ryan has to know.
Oh, Ryan knows.
He knows. He's 13 or something?
He's 13.
Yeah, so he knows.
And arguably maybe Randy should know, but
Randall's 9?
He's 9 and he's
kind of an old believer.
He really is. And that's on me. That's on me. I will tell you though, in general.
How do you feel about Santa Claus in general? Like the idea of like lying to your kids, or do you feel like it's so I don't know, because you are lying to your kids, but it's fun. Like Santa Claus is fun, right?
Well,
when the kids believe in Santa,
we throw back. We do know that there was a Saint Nicholas, right, at some point, and Santa Claus maybe originated actually, ironically, from the Dutch.
Yeah,
it wasn't the OG Santa Claus was Dutch, I think. I'm not sure. So we're sort of leaning on the. It's not quite as. Do
you know about Hans Moof?
No, but
I'll tell you about that.
It's not quite as nefarious as the Tooth Fairy, right? I mean, because we still practice Tooth Fairy in our home. We really do.
Oh, really? Tooth Fairy can go on forever until they have all their teeth in, right? I mean, so they have no baby teeth, right? When do you get rid of your baby teeth?
I mean, I think Randall has still been losing baby teeth. How old do you lose
all your teeth?
I think Randall's right around the age 10? Where they all start 10, 11, where they all finally start popping out. I'm just a believer they're only young once. They're only innocent and a little naive, and where the world feels like we were talking about last time, magical once. I'm not in any rush to accelerate their road to adulthood.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I don't think you get better outcomes of children that way.
No, I've never seen the Santa Claus myth like really hurt anybody, right? Like that's the thing. Does it hurt them? Like no, it's kind of a fun little thing. Like I couldn't imagine, like for example, my ex-girlfriend Lauren, she just had a baby, and it's her baby's first Christmas, and her baby's so adorable. Her name's Sophia. And I can't imagine like telling little Sophia like right off the bat, like, hey, there's no such thing as a Santa Claus thing. If you hear about it, it's all bullshit. Yeah. You got to let little Sophia believe in it, right? As she's getting older, like it builds the excitement. It's fun.
It's the same thing though. My guiding principle for many parenting things is I just try to stay just a quarter step ahead of these other goddamn kids that are out to mess with your kids' serenity.
Oh yeah, that's how it usually happens as a kid.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. I don't know how your Christmases were when you were a kid. Did you have good Christmases as a kid, or was it crappy?
No, that's one thing. Grandma and Grandpa, they tried pretty hard. They weren't afraid to rack up the credit card bill for a nice Christmas morning. They weren't. Yeah,
but it wasn't from your dad and your mom.
Oh yeah, mom and
as much.
dad, they weren't functional adults. They weren't actually able to raise me. Dad would come in and out every now and then when he was a little bit more,
So you missed out, like, although you got good presents from grandma and grandpa, you missed out on the fun of snooping, right?
No, I lived with grandma and grandpa, so no,
you did?
there was a lot.
So there was
grandma and
snooping.
grandpa raised me as parents.
Okay, so did you snoop for the presents?
I mean, I remember one time I got my grandpa so pissed off because in the home I was raised in, there was a bathtub in one bathroom and a shower in the other, and I would go use the shower in the master bedroom, and that's where I would shower. And one day I come out of the shower and I just see a bunch of Christmas gifts just haphazardly hid under their bed.
Yeah.
And I just saw him just living my best life, just trying to be a clean 11-year-old or whatever. And I made the mistake of saying, oh, hey, by the way, I saw those gifts. You guys did a really shitty job hiding them. I saw them, and they Grandpa went off on me. He felt so like he felt
violated.
He felt violated, like I was a bank robber and I broke into a safe or something like that. It was a really odd experience. He was usually pretty level-handed.
So we had a basement in our house. We had like a garage, and like in these houses, like on the East Coast. Usually you'll have like the basement of the house, and that's usually like finished off, so we had one side was a garage and the other side was sort of like a finished off basement part. But when you were down in the basement, there was these like like in a cellar, there's like the little windows that you can basically just see out like there, and they usually fold in or out like that. So I peeked through one of those and saw my mom in our finished off basement wrapping all the presents, and I saw what she got for everybody, and so I knew, and I had all the secrets. And Mad Dog and I got into a fight about it because I knew everything that he was getting, and he basically beat me up until I told him what he was getting, and then I also lied to him. Like I told him he was getting stuff that he didn't get.
Oh, how did that work out once it
Not good.
Not good? Yeah.
No, he was mad at me.
Yeah, I was a snooper though as a kid. I think there are some kids that are inherently snoopers, and inherently not. No. I for sure was a snooper. Am a snooper still to this day.
Amazingly, we would get so Nintendo was big. Like Nintendo had just come out. I remember getting Nintendo for Christmas. I remember how excited I was. Like the first original Nintendo, the soccer game that they had, for the time, was amazing. I don't know why it was so much fun.
Dude, they all were amazing.
It was so simple and basic. And then, so we had soccer, and we didn't even like soccer. We had soccer, we had kung fu.
No, that kung fu was fantastic. That was a great game.
You just kick the people.
Yeah.
Kicking them.
You could do that little Karate Kid jump kick thing, and it was fantastic.
And there was all these people like running out, and you just got to kick them once, and they die basically. And then you get all the way to the end. I still remember our friend Timmy Byer that lived right down the road. I got to the end, and I saved the girl, and he actually got excited, and he goes, "Hey man, not bad for a video game." And Mark and I are like, "You're such a pervert. Like it's an 8-pixel, character." And he's like, "Hey man, not bad for a video game."
That's great. No, the Christmas at the Buddy household is pretty mild. I mean, you have to realize that everything in my life is a little upside down because my wife works graveyard shift. She works at a hospital. You're not supposed to call it graveyard. Works third shift. So we're always a little upside down in our household, trying to get the schedule to line up with mom and dad. And
we grew up in Poughkeepsie, right? We were about 45 minutes away from Westchester County, where my grandparents lived. Grandma Belle lived right down the road from Grandma Finch. And so Grandma Finch is obviously my mother's mom. They grew up, my parents grew up like, they were high school sweethearts. They grew up, living like right together. So we would go down to Grandma Belle's house, and Grandma Belle's house is where all my uncles and aunts live. Like when I go to New Jersey in the summer, that's all my aunts and uncles on the Bell side, and everybody. You could not have a cooler, nicer family. The entire family now, because of Mark and I, everybody works out. Everybody runs, walks, lifts, trains. Our whole family used to be completely obese. Everybody in the family was obese. Everybody. And now they're not. Like, that's badass.
That's really special. That's very special.
The impact that Mark and I have had on our cousins and our nephews. Now, there's still people that have weight to lose and whatever, but everybody's fighting the good fight. They're all doing carnivore diets, or they're doing keto, or they've just figured things out. My Uncle Peter, he walks like 6 miles every single day, and he had a broken back. He had back surgery coming off a broken back, and they told him he couldn't really work out. And he said, "How about walking?" They said, "Yeah, you can walk." So he walks 6 miles every day. He used to be, well over 300 pounds. He's about 6'3", and he was always well over 300 pounds. And now he's actually like skinny, which is weird because all growing up, he was our big fat uncle. Now he's in great shape. And Mark says that he had the best quote. He came up to Mark in New Jersey, put his hand on his shoulder. He's like, "I get it now, Smelly." He's like, well, he didn't call him Smelly. He calls him Mark. He's like, "I get it now, Mark. Being in shape is a full-time job." And he just told Mark that. Mark's like, yeah, I've known that forever. Like it really is something that you have to put in your full effort every day.
Yeah, Mark said something to me maybe a year ago. He said, no one's in really great shape by accident. I mean, I'm sure there's outliers, but no one's in really great shape by accident. No one's lean without working some sort of dietary program.
And the only people that are like so-called by accident are maybe people that like they're very active because of what they do, and they're maybe not realizing that they're working out. Like some people have jobs where they're literally doing physical labor all day, and they're basically not overweight because they're not hanging out eating. They're physically working a lot. So those would be the only people that are by accident, But it's not necessarily an accident because they're working all the time. Yeah. They're doing the work, But yeah, you're pretty much right. Like it is it's a full-time gig, But we used to go to my grandparents on my on both sides. We'd have like the pick the names. So we didn't used to do white elephant. The white elephant where everybody buys a present and then you pick. Like we do that. So we do that now. I have one for $50 at Mark and Andy's house, and then April, Andy's sister, she has one at her house the next day. So one of them's $50 and one of them's $30. So I got to go out and buy 2 random presents. Probably get In-N-Out gift cards or something. You got to get something. So here's my advice to anybody that is doing one of these white elephant things ever. You always need to buy something that you want because you can steal things from other people.
So when is I've only participated in a few white elephants, and I've realized, like every other game, there are some strategies to it. Sounds like
real strategy.
Sounds like you're kind of let me know.
Strategy number 1 is to buy something that you want. That way you can never leave the thing, because you can always steal back your own gift, right? So and you can only steal up to 3 times. So that's a strategy too of who's going to take what. And then also it's good to have allies. So I used to always kind of team up with my mom when she was around. I'd be like, "Hey mom, come on, I'll hook you up, you hook me up." I'd get a set of pot holders, and my mom really wanted them. So I'd hold on to them for dear life because I knew my mom wanted them. I'd swap with her on whatever she got. So there are some strategies and kind of be in cahoots with people beforehand and sort of agree,
Now, you said you were going to get a gift for your dad. You were talking.
I need to buy a gift for my dad. I'll tell you what I did for the rest of the family because this is awesome. I have a 25% off at Lululemon, right? I have an account there, and I have a discount. So I went to Lululemon with my dad, and we just bought 2 things for everybody in the family. Dad bought one, I bought one. Hey, let's just buy Mark and Andy, Jake and Quinn. They, you got to buy something that people are going to use. And so I know if I buy you a Lululemon sweater that's really nice, that you're going to utilize that.
Yeah, I'd be so afraid of getting a coffee stain on it or something like that.
Well, if you think about Mark and I have had Lululemon stuff for going on 10 years or more, right? And some of the stuff I still actually have, and it's still in good condition. So although it's very expensive and a lot of people complain it's really expensive, a lot of the stuff that I've had, I have for a decade,
Yeah, I mean, if it can last, right? If it amortizes out over 5-10 years, that's a great deal, right?
What's the best thing you ever got for Christmas?
Okay, best thing I ever got for Christmas. That's I mean, I don't know if this is an appropriate place to say this because we're supposed to, fitness and so forth, but that first Nintendo NES back in 1985, right?
Yeah. That was one of the best things.
It's life-changing. I mean, it's when you're just a normal, boring kid and all of a sudden you get to play Super Mario Bros. Or Excite Bike? You know,
So that was awesome. And then I had a Christmas where I just turned 16. And when I just turned 16, my dad had made this like a present, and I opened it, and it's like a box, and it's like, oh, go over here, and there's a note in your stocking. And I go over and check the note in the stocking, and it's telling me to go somewhere else, and then go somewhere else. And it basically led me down to the garage. And in the garage was a 1969 Camaro. It was my first car.
Whoa.
It was kind of it was probably $2,000-$3,000 car.
No, I
it
mean,
was kind of a beater. Like it needed work, but my dad bought it because he knew I wanted to like work on it,
Right.
kind of fix up my own thing. And so it had some rust on the fenders that we fixed up. But other than that, it was pretty cool. And I had it for a couple of years. I had all these dreams of totally restoring it and doing all that. And then I realized I don't make enough money working at Champs Sports selling sneakers to support my my habit of trying to restore a 69 Camaro.
Yeah.
So it just didn't work out. But I had that car for a couple of years. It was awesome. And then also, my dad's a gangster. He's done some really cool stuff for us. When I was, I made a short film called Billy Jones.
Dear Dirt Dog Dave, my name is Billy Jones and I'm 12 years old. My colleagues, Jack Puffkin, Jake Cherrywood, and I have been enjoying the smooth, rich,
Oh, does him do it?
satisfying flavor of your cigarettes for quite some time.
And Billy Jones is I made that right when I graduated from USC. I basically, so at USC, you work on somebody else's project when you're like a junior, and then when you're a senior, you make your own project and you get people to come help you on your project. And so basically, when you're a senior, but they only pick 4 people to make projects a year. Out of there's maybe 40 students in the film school altogether, which is very little to begin with. And out of that, they're going to pick 4 people that actually get to make a movie that the school funds. So I went and pitched my movie. And usually you have to go into the pitch with 2 people that are going to help you on your movie, 2 people that are like the class under you that are going to help you. I went in with 8. I had a stacked team. I went in, I told them what I wanted to do, and the teachers just looked at me and they're like, you're way too ambitious for this film school. That's what they told me.
And that's at USC?
Yeah.
And they said you're way too ambitious?
You're way too ambitious.
That seems a little bit that seems...
And so I went to, I didn't get picked. I remember the next day the list came out and I went up to the list and I'm looking for my name and I'm like, these people got picked over me? People that were even in my classes that I thought didn't have as much talent, or didn't put in as much work maybe, or didn't have a good script, So I'm like, I can't believe, I know that, this kid got picked, and one of my friends, Rick, he deserved to get picked, and he's awesome. He went on to direct 3 episodes of The Mandalorian. So I was in school with some pretty gangster people, but some of these other people that got picked, weren't at that level. And I remember being sad and dejected. And then the guy that teaches directing at USC stopped me. I was in the elevator with him. And he said, your script destroyed everybody's. It was awesome. And I said, really? And he goes, oh, he's like, it's different level. I'm like, really? He goes, oh, yeah, you should definitely make that. No matter what you do, you should definitely make that short film. And I'm like, And so just like that, and then he got off the elevator and left and never talked to him again. But I went and made that movie because the teacher told me to.
Now, that's pretty sick, Chris. That's actually pretty sick. I don't understand why.
Well, go ahead. The story
please.
Still runs because my dad's involved in this. So I had to raise money to make this movie. There's no way I'm going to be able to make it for nothing, right? And so I'm raising money for the movie. I'm like, I need 10 grand here, 10 grand here to do this. And we actually shot it on 35 millimeter film. So I was trying to raise the money, and my dad said, why don't we go to some of these anti-smoking organizations, because they have to give money away to. So the movie was basically about a kid who smoked himself to death to win a prize, like Marlboro Miles and Camel Cash. This was a fictional version of that, where the kid's trying to save up enough points in order to win a prize from his favorite cigarette company, right? And that's the gist of the movie. And I went to these anti-smoking organizations. I think we raised $40,000 or $50,000 towards making the movie and my dad helped me do it. He helped me go on the meetings, whatever. So I worked on this movie, and it had all these special effects shots and all this crazy shit going on in it, and I had no idea what I was doing. And so I shot it all, but I had it all in the can, and I had all these green screen shots, and I was like, well, we'll figure it out later, you know. To do all that work to like scan and do the special effects, I ended up where I needed about 10 grand before I could finish my movie. Now, I'd been trying to finish this movie for 3 years, and every single time I would see people at a family function or whatever, I'd be embarrassed because my movie wasn't done. And I was just kind of waiting around to like get some money to be able to make it. So people go, oh, what's going on with your movie? I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm working on it. So finally, one Christmas when I came home from school, my dad gave me like a photo. My parents, my mom and my dad, gave me like a photo album. And in the photo album was like all these pictures of me, you know, going through film school and whatever. And at the end of it, there was a check for 10 grand to finish my movie. And my dad said, one day I'm going to die and, you know, you guys will get an inheritance. Just consider this like a down payment on that, you know? And he's like, go finish your movie. And I was like speechless. You know, like that's a.
Do you still have access to this movie?
Billy Jones?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can watch Billy Jones online. I believe. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's on my YouTube. I think it's actually in my. If you go on my Instagram, I think it's in my the link in my bio. I'm pretty sure. But that was probably the best present I ever got because it was money, and it allowed me to do something that I wanted to do. You know, and I think that's like the key.
Now. All right, as a bachelor, with a bachelor who's tight, you know, the favorite uncle, obviously, of the family. Do you have any solo Christmas traditions? Do you like watch Die Hard or It's a Christmas Story or anything like that? Because I'll tell you, every year I attempt to watch A Christmas Story. And I attempt to watch the original Die Hard. Those are kind of like my own personal that I'll carry to the grave. I want to watch those movies.
Yeah, Christmas Story is great. I actually got to work when I'm the producer of Prescription Thugs is Ralphie.
So are you kidding me?
Yeah, Peter Billingsley. He produced my movie.
You have probably told me that before, but you know me. My memory is just like a cup
I
with a hole in the bottom.
got to hang with him again, and then they just made HBO Max just put out like a Christmas Story sequel. Like a new one. And I thought, I watched the beginning of it and I didn't get into it. And I thought it was probably going to be terrible, but my dad actually said it was great because my dad loves Peter because I worked with him. You know, it's like my dad met a famous guy and he was like all pumped. And plus Peter is a staunch Republican. He's like, he works with Glenn Beck.
Oh, really?
So my dad loved him and they got along great. So then my dad's like, oh, I watched the new Peter Billingsley movie. It's amazing. He's got an amazing ending. And I'm like, really? I'm like, I thought I didn't think it was. I just always think when anything's a sequel, especially when it took 20 years to make, I always assume for the worst. But my dad said it was good. I haven't seen it.
I want to see them bring as much. I want like what it's called, what Kevin Smith calls it, fan service.
Yeah.
I want to see them bring as many throwbacks to.
I think that's what that did. I just haven't watched it, to be honest. I tried to watch it and then I didn't get into it. Sometimes when I don't get into something in the first 10 minutes, I just shut it off. And then sometimes I'll be able to go back to it. But things have to grip you, you know?
Hey, listen, we'll call this segment, if you notice it's a reoccurring theme, it's the segment where Russellbuddy tries to get Chris to go bad on people and in front of the camera.
Go bad on people?
Yeah. So, hey, what do you think about, I think I saw some... speaking of Glenn Beck, some Blaze, right?
Oh yeah. Crowder, he left.
And it sounds like there was some he didn't have access to his email list at the end. Did you catch that part?
No.
Okay, so you remember
those things are tough, right? Because
they shut him out from his email list. Was the initial insinuations allegedly from what was sort of being said but not said on some videos.
Yeah, I mean
that's the subject.
It's a big business, right? So like they're louder with Crowder show and the Glenn Beck show, and they're big entities. So it's hard to, like a lot of good things come to an end. I don't know exactly what happened, but it got to a point where Crowder couldn't take it anymore, and he left. Right?
I mean, he probably got bigger than the Blaze.
Yeah, maybe. And that's okay.
I mean, it's not a dig against the Blaze. I'm not really familiar with the Blaze's work a lot.
I'll tell you this: I don't like any any network or station or anything. This is my problem even with Crowder. I don't like anybody that's like definitely chosen a side. It's hard for me to be down totally with somebody like that.
And
I don't
it's
mind if people
probably
pick a side, but when you totally choose a side, like Crowder will say, this is a right-wing Republican show.
I will say this, to probably respectively or respectfully, to the detriment of your career, you've never just grabbed onto any like one side and said, I'm just gonna like pick up the flagpole of this and carry this forward.
I've made the mistake of doing things like that. Like when you stick your flag in the ground and you say, I'm on a carnivore diet, right? And then you hashtag everything carnivore, you get kind of locked into that. And when you want to eat a potato, you feel like an asshole, you know? And so I always just say like, I don't know. I always just say, don't lean too far either way, you know?
Moderation does not get attention, does it? It just doesn't get attention. It's very hard to...
It doesn't get attention. And most people, that's where they fall. And then nuance doesn't sell. So the fact that nuance doesn't sell, it's really hard to sell people on things that actually work, right? Like I can go on the internet and I can talk about things that actually really work, but there's like not some, people want to see, take this pill, do this thing and you'll get better. And it's not like that,
Yeah, I mean, it's a brave thing to go out on your own, right? That can't be easy to do, right? Once you're in it. Anyways, I just thought that was to not have access to the Mug Club. I'm not a member. I'm not in anyone's email list or anything like that. I just thought it was weird. Like, oh wow, that's business being done.
It's business.
That's business being done, right?
It's amazing. It's kind of like Conor McGregor when Khabib was beating the shit out of him. And in the middle of the round, and Conor's like, it's just business.
Talk now.
And then he said to him, it's just business.
Yeah.
Because he's like, hey man, don't kill me. This is just like, I was just kidding around.
That's great.
Well,
again, this is we're gonna drop this on Christmas, and we're gonna lead in right into Jay Feldman's podcast right after this. He had a good take on food nutrition, and it again kind of a moderate. I mean, there was definitely moderate and nuanced. So even though he had some really brilliant informed insights.
So what's hard for me is listening to people like Jay Feldman be very adamant about certain things. Like you don't need fish oil, you don't need omega-3s, and then actually like looking into it and studying things about omega-3s and fatty acids and like their effects on inflammation and all that. And then yesterday I'm on with my doctor, and my doctor's like, yeah, we really need to get you taking that fish oil. And I'm like, well, I told you I stopped taking the fish oil because like I was burping it up and blah, blah. He said, yeah, we really need to get you should maybe get a liquid one or whatever. And I agree that like on paper that looks good, but I feel like after talking to Jay that it just doesn't work and it's not going to help me. So it's hard when I'm always hearing conflicting advice from people.
Jay's a smart man, and after you left to go for your walk, I actually just sort of kept him trapped here in the studio and just.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The nuance is like, who do you listen to? Do you listen to your doctor? Or do you listen to somebody who's like studying like up to date right now? And it's like that's a tough call because the doctor's going to give you his best knowledge. Now, and that's like I say this all the time. The most fascinating thing about nutrition science and all this bodybuilding science and everything is everybody has the same set of studies. And you can interpret a study in a vegan way or a carnivore way. That's how crazy it is. Like where a vegan will read something and have one interpretation of it, and a carnivore will read the same study and have a different way of a different perspective on it.
Like too much fat can be hard on the heart. Too much carbs can be hard on your diabetes or something like that, right?
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting because there's so many studies that it's hard to, it's like, and people leverage them in whatever way looks good for them, and that's always going to happen.
Well, dude, it's been basically a year that you've been doing this podcast.
All right.
And it's been a great year. The channel has been pumping out. The Instagram account is growing and growing and growing, and it's been fun, man. Well, I just want to say it's been great doing this with you, and Merry Christmas and all that.
Yeah,
good
Merry
stuff.
Christmas. It's been awesome, man. I love doing this. I mean, obviously, like we just started doing it kind of for fun, kind of just have have something to do, talk a little shit, you know. And yeah, it's been great, and it's been great to see it grow. And hopefully in the new year we can grow it into something big, you know.
All right, dude. Well,
Just
hey,
keep talking.
Merry Christmas. Here comes Jay.
Merry Christmas.
Fighting out of Sacramento, California.
Woo! What you gonna do? Better. Stronger.
Son of a bitch.
Faster. Oh, yeah!
All right. Today we have a guest. Jay Feldman is here. And Jay, you have a very interesting way of looking at diet and nutrition that's different than a lot of people that we hear. Mark and I have been stuck in this carnivore keto kind of rabbit hole for a long time and doing things like meat and fruit. And through Brad Kearns, we came around to your work. And can you explain exactly like the way that you look at food and what do you call that, and how do you look at food that's sort of different than these other diets do?
Yeah, definitely. So when I'm looking at health, biology, food, nutrition, all of it is through a lens, which is called the bioenergetic view of health. And so what that means is that we're looking at the energy availability in every cell from the mitochondria that are producing that energy, that ATP, and looking at that as the determinant of our health, of our function, how well we can think, how well we're going to digest our food, how well our immune system is functioning, and looking at the different things we change in our environment, the food that we take in, the supplements that we take in, how much sleep we get, how much light we get, what types of exercise we do, and how much, looking at all those things on this bioenergetic level, this level of how it's going to impact our ability to produce energy, or how it will impact the amount of energy we produce and that we have, and using that as the determinant, or viewing that as the determinant of how it's going to affect our health.
And so different foods obviously have different impacts, and is it about figuring out what's right for the individual, or do we all seem to respond to kind of the same things, or how does that work out, and how do you figure that out?
Yeah, so there are universal principles, and it might sound rather, this is not normally the way that people talk about health, but it's not so far-fetched. So you'll hear people discuss mitochondrial function or dysfunction quite often. What we're really getting at is how well we're producing energy. That's what our mitochondria do. We look at any disease process, any symptom that we have tends to come back to an inability to produce energy. And so there are going to be certain principles that will be universal to every human and non-human, like every animal, every mammal, even plants, that are going to determine how well they produce energy. So you mentioned carnivore, you also mentioned carnivore plus fruit. Part of why I would really lean into carnivore plus fruit as opposed to just carnivore is because of the value of those carbohydrates in energy production, where there's going to be a difference in terms of how well we produce energy from carbs and fats, how quickly we produce energy, and what sorts of adaptations that leads to. That will, from my view, determine what's going to be healthiest. And I think that's one of the central reasons why it's actually important to have some amount of carbohydrates in the diet. And I think it's why a lot of people who are strict carnivore will tend to bring in some of those carbohydrates over time, is because of the value there in terms of producing energy.
Do you think the meat and fruit diet is a good diet, or would you go beyond that and add in, you like talking about adding in other things as well? Like, do you add in grains? Do you have, how do you feel about stuff like that?
So I think if we want to give somebody the simplest place to start, fruit and meat can be that place. It's not exactly the endpoint I would want to get to, but I'm not a big fan of grains. I'm not a big fan of nuts and seeds. And the reason for those things is because of their impacts on our digestive health and the impacts of our gut and digestive health on our ability to produce energy. So there are a handful of factors, a ton of factors, that are going to be the main things that affect our ability to produce energy. One of the main things that inhibits it is the production of certain toxins from bacteria in our intestines. When I say toxins, I'm not talking about some sort of like woo-woo toxin. When you say that, people like have a reflex. But I'm talking about something that's considered literally a toxin from the medical standpoint. One of the most common that's discussed and used in research and looked at as a major driver of death and disease is called endotoxin. The technical name is lipopolysaccharide, or LPS. This is something that's produced from certain types of bacteria in our intestines. When we have a really severe infection, when somebody's like severely immunocompromised, those infections will be so bad they'll get endotoxemia, which causes sepsis, or cause death. But low-grade endotoxemia is found in all sorts of degenerative states, diabetes, obesity, on from there. And it's one of the central things that is going to inhibit our ability to produce energy. That's why endotoxin is so harmful, is because it blocks that energy production. So a central part of the bioenergetic view is consuming things that are going to minimize any production and exposure to lipopolysaccharide or other gut toxins, because that's going to be a major thing that'll inhibit our ability to produce energy.
And what are the foods? Like, if we could just make it simple for people, because people listen to this and go, mitochondria, I don't know what the guy's talking about. Like, can you distill that down to, like, I don't know, maybe like 10 foods that would fall into these categories that would help us produce energy?
So on the digestive standpoint, I would say the things we'd want to avoid would be the whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, and raw vegetables.
Okay.
These are the things that
Stuff I don't like anyway.
Exactly.
Perfect. I like nuts, but I don't need them. Yeah, I can do without.
Yeah, and those are the things that are most offensive, most difficult to digest. They have a lot of anti-nutrients, which are plant defensive compounds, because the plants don't want these parts of them to be eaten. And so those are going to cause a lot of issues gut-wise.
And legumes are things like beans. Even peanuts are legumes considered, right? So beans would be a no-go also.
Mm-hmm. And those are all the seeds of the plant. The nuts, the seeds, the legumes, the grains. They're all the seed of the plant. The plant doesn't want us to consume them. They need those to reproduce.
Yeah.
And so
a little bit of truth to Paul Saladino's work with the plant toxins, and they don't want to be eaten, and all that stuff kind of makes some sense as well.
Yeah, definitely.
What else would you avoid?
So another central one would be certain types of fats. So the polyunsaturated fats, the omega-6s, the seed oils are ones that
we talked about seed oils yesterday, yeah.
Yeah.
I said there's a lot of seed oil apologists on the internet. I don't know if that's what you call it, but like sympathizers? What do you call it? Like when there's people that will say, like, drink as much seed oil as you can. And I'm like, I'm running away from those people. I don't consume them, but you said that you don't think they're any good either, right?
Yeah, and I would say they're even a problem in nuts and seeds, which are really high in the same types of fats that are in the seed oils.
So it's the actual fat.
Yeah.
It's not even the fact that it's a toxic seed oil. Like that stuff, we don't need that kind of fat.
Yeah, and that's the most common place people are getting it. It's in all of our food, anything that's fried, all the processed foods, they use those oils. But I would say the nuts and seeds, even salmon, which is really high in omega-3s, they're all super high in these unsaturated fats. And yes, the sympathizers will say there's no randomized controlled study where they had one person eating or one group eating a ton and another group not eating very much, and they saw a negative health outcome in the ones who were eating more. There's a lot of issues with study design. There's a lot of reasons why those sorts of studies aren't done.
Also, this is like this sludge that we put in our body, and we don't really know what happens to it because it's only 60, 70 years old. You know, it hasn't been around for a long time for us to really know what it does to the body. And I think that's important when we're looking into this stuff as well, is like looking into these foods and these newer foods, and are they going to have consequences? It's like, well, when was it invented? You know, when was meat invented? A million years ago, a couple million years ago, you know? So it's like, I think there's differences there as well that we need to definitely be looking out for.
Definitely. And we can, even if there's not the randomized controlled studies, we can look at the mechanisms for those things. And I think it does become pretty clear that, for one, these types of fats are hibernation fats in nature. So the only reason why these fats are in the nuts and seeds is because at very low temperatures, we need those sorts of fats in order to function, in order not to die. When you have a more saturated fat, that'll be found in more tropical regions. So like cocoa, coconuts, those are higher in saturated fats. They're in more like warm regions. In the colder regions, you have much higher polyunsaturated fats. And you can take the same soybeans and grow them in warmer regions, and they'll have less of the unsaturated fats.
Anything else we should be avoiding?
Yeah. Well, and so just to bow tie that real quick, there's a reason why I was getting to that is that in the same way that these are low temperature hibernation fats in nature, they do the same things for us. So bears any animal that hibernates needs these fats to hibernate, because these are essential for slowing our metabolism down. They do the same thing in us, and I would say that's something we really want to avoid. It's actually one of the main ways to slow down our ability to produce energy is these types of fats. Basically, they're
interesting. You know, the squirrels, they like the acorns.
Exactly.
And I think acorns are one of the only foods, besides maybe breast milk, that have carbs and fat in them. They're almost like a donut, I guess. I've never had an acorn. I don't even know if they're they obviously must not be good, or must be bitter or something, because we don't eat them.
Yeah, it's not like a hazelnut.
No, but it has fat and carbs in it, which I thought was interesting. And they say that's why they store them up. They're very energy dense.
See, I would say it's the unsaturated fats in there.
Is that have anything to do with like the whole visceral fat or anything like that? Is that in the same discussion or something different?
It's a little separate. But it's a great example. The squirrels or bears, they use these unsaturated fats from nuts and seeds to put on body fat and to hibernate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we want to avoid that.
Unless you want to put on fat and hibernate.
And then what else should we be staying away from?
So the unsaturated fats, the hard to digest foods are the main things I would stay away from. And then I would say on the other side, there's a lot of things we'd want to include that are going to provide the nutrition for energy production.
Sure.
The carbs, I would say, is a big part of that. So, but I would be leaning toward the easily digestible ones. So leaning toward really ripe fruit, some cooked roots and tubers, squashes, things like that, as opposed to the grain-based carbohydrates. And we can,
so potatoes instead of rice?
Yeah, white rice is a bit of an exception when it comes to grains because
it's kind of okay.
We've stripped away all of the anti-nutrient
Everybody
components.
loves you right now. So if you're everybody watching this, white rice, like, right? I think white rice is delicious and it doesn't have much in it either, right? So it's like there's not much either way. Like there's not much that can be bad from it, right?
So it also seems like you just green-lighted spaghetti squash. Is that right?
Yeah. Spaghetti squash is good. And I would say better than the alternative.
Not SpaghettiOs, spaghetti squash.
Oh, never mind. My bad.
SpaghettiOs.
Yeah. I hope no one's avoiding the spaghetti squash, but it's where were we prior to this?
So that's good for you, though, spaghetti squash.
Foods
I like
to
that.
include.
I'm gonna smash
Foods to
that.
include.
Yeah, well, and so those sorts of carbohydrates I would say are ideal. With the rice, that's why I wanted to mention was that all of the harmful components are stripped away. So we've taken the brown rice, which is the whole piece, taken away the outer protective parts that have the anti-nutrient defenses and stripped those off.
Which
and we
is
just
so
have
crazy because when you're a kid, you hear like, you got to eat the brown rice because it's good for you. And it's like, oh, it just tastes horrible.
Yeah, well, no traditional cultures eat brown rice or eat whole grains. If they're going to eat some sort of whole grain, they would sprout it. They would soak and sprout it. They would ferment it. All these things to get rid of the anti-nutrients. They would spend so much time processing them. I live in Latin America. I'm traveling and, in Ecuador and Mexico, and they don't just eat plain corn. They nixtamalize it, which takes 24 plus hours where they soak it and they use what's called lime. It's calcium hydroxide to break down the defensive compounds. And we've decided that we know better. You don't need to waste all your time doing that. We'll just take the whole brown rice instead of the white rice.
Well, that's amazing because, all these cultures, they've always had, if you look at any of these cultures, they've always had ways of like soaking and sprouting and doing all these things to these plants. Like they know like that they have these toxins in them. They know that they have to get these toxins out of them. Otherwise, in some countries they use cassava a lot, and I think cassava is just poisonous if you just eat it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like they've figured out how to make it not poisonous. I think even raw cashews are poison if you just eat them. Like if you just eat them off the tree or something.
Okay, I didn't know that about the cashews, but definitely with cassava it has to be well processed.
Dr. Baker said that. I think he said if you ate a handful of raw cashews, like you'd be pretty sick.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's interesting as well. Then what else do we want to be including? Where do we find our good old steak? Our beef.
Yeah, so that's the piece I was going to get to next. We have the easily digested, relatively nutrient-dense carbohydrates, and then I would be adding in fat and protein from animal-based sources largely. So we're talking dairy, eggs, meat, organ meats, seafood. But the asterisk with the seafood is low PUFA, so not really the salmon so much, but there's a lot of low-fat fish.
Well, so salmon's not that great for you. I mean, we've been told that salmon's the bomb. Like, that's the ultimate pinnacle of health food, right?
Yeah, so there's this huge uprising against the omega-6s, against the seed oils. If we're going to say those are unstable, susceptible to peroxidation, they rot in your body, and again, there's deeper mechanisms there, but let's kind of keep it simple. Omega-3s are worse. They're more unstable. Most fish oils you're going to grab off the shelf are already damaged and oxidized. By the time it gets through your digestive tract, it's even worse. By the time it's then being used in your body, it's even worse. And there's some actual good evidence that the more polyunsaturated fats, including the omega-3s that you have in your cells, the faster you age and the shorter your lifespan is. This is across all species, not only just humans.
So my doctor prescribed me fish oil, and they want me to take like 4 grams of fish oil a day. And I discontinued it because I kept burping it up and it was disgusting. And then I would try to take it at night and then I would burp it up when I was sleeping and it was just gross.
Yeah.
And it was a high quality fish oil from a good, it's from a pharmaceutical, like, grade place. And so I discontinued it. Is that probably a smart idea?
I would say so. It does have anti-inflammatory effects, but those are a lot of things have anti-inflammatory effects. One of the main ones that is used medically is steroids, right? Corticosteroids.
Yeah.
They have a short-term anti-inflammatory effect, but A, it doesn't work long-term. It has less and less of an effect. You have to use more and more. And B, it comes at a major cost. The stress hormone, it leads to the degradation of our bones, of our joints, of our muscles.
Breaks you down.
Yeah, and the omega-3s are really pretty parallel there, where they have anti-inflammatory effects, especially short-term, but long-term it comes at a cost.
Really? So omega-3s in general, we don't need them? Or we need very little?
The amount, if you
this is like pretty controversial, isn't it?
With the omega-3s, it's more controversial now, but maybe it's just a matter of time.
I've always heard, this is the very first time I'm ever hearing in my entire life that omega-3s might be bad, to be honest. I have not heard this yet.
Yeah, so if you mentioned, are they essential? The only essential fats that are widely considered to be essential are omega-6s and omega-3s. I think it's arguable as to whether or not they're actually essential. The initial research on them is very old, from the 30s, and it's poor. They didn't know about certain nutrients. There's these confounding variables. But even if you wanted to say they're essential, the amount that's essential is like 0.1% of your diet, and you're going to get that if you're eating any fat. If you're eating eggs, if you're eating meat, relatively low PUFA things, low omega-6s, low omega-3s, you'll still be getting way more than is essential anyway.
Wow. So, yeah, that's great. I can mix I can keep the fish oil out.
PUFA? What is PUFA?
Yeah, so PUFA is polyunsaturated fats, and that's the omega-6s and omega-3s. And yeah, PUFA is just an easy way to say it.
Sort of like a FUPA, but different. It gives you a FUPA. The PUFA gives you the FUPA. Right? Something like that. Okay, so for protein, beef is good. We're good with beef. We're good with beef fat. We're good with that. What about any other fat sources, or is butter good?
So with the fats, my main thing would be avoiding the PUFA and the FUPA.
Yeah.
So avoiding the omega-6s and 3s. And so ruminant animals, that's going to be beef, bison, goat, lamb, are very, very low in PUFA. So is their fat. So even if you're getting the fattiest beef, really not an issue there. And you can get beef tallow or use those fat sources. The same is true for dairy. So dairy is going to be mostly saturated and monounsaturated, very little polyunsaturated, very low in the omega-3s and 6s. And so that's another great source, butter or ghee or anything else dairy-wise.
Yeah, what about other dairy? Is it okay to have, Greek yogurt? Is it okay to have cottage cheese, things like that can add, protein, but they also have fat in them? Is that those fats are fine?
The fats are fine. Are there other potential issues there with lactose tolerance and reactivity to the proteins? Potentially, but for someone who's not having those issues.
So some people, dairy affects them, and if you sort of know it affects your hair and your skin and whatever, people have all sorts of issues with dairy, it seems like.
Yeah.
Then you stay away from it. But if you're not having those problems, then it's fine.
And normally those problems are reversible, but during the time when you're dealing with the issue, I would say, don't continue to have.
Yeah. And then what else are we adding in there? Anything else?
Yeah, so from the fat side, what I was going to kind of stipulate with the protein too, so like chicken, turkey, any non-ruminant animal, it can have more pigs. Pork is a big one.
Yeah.
The more PUFA they eat, the more unsaturated fats they eat, the more is in their fat.
Yeah, because they have one stomach. They're monogastric.
Exactly.
So you get everything they get.
Exactly. And so if you're eating those and they're not fed well, you want to make sure you're getting very lean cuts, like a chicken breast. Or if you know that it's pasture raised with low PUFA intake, so you don't want the acorn-fed pork, even though it's said to be better.
Yeah.
But if they're actually raised well, then you can have the fat in there too. So that's another stipulation.
Yeah, that's one thing I warn people about a lot. It's really hard to get good chicken and pork, and you have to really look. And when you look on the labels, there's not even a whole lot of help. Like there's maybe one brand of chicken in the higher end store that I can go and buy at the actual grocery store. Otherwise, I got to go to like some specialty place for it. But for the most part, chickens and pigs are not, treated great, and so it's hard to find the good stuff.
Yeah, and on the labels it'll say things like vegetarian fed.
Yeah,
they aren't vegetarians. Chickens aren't vegetarians.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, vegetarian fed doesn't like it's actually worse.
Yeah,
you want things to be out in a pasture, right?
Yeah, eating a lot of bugs for the chickens.
Yeah,
that's a huge part of it.
And then for the pork, what people want to look for is like a heritage breed pork or pork that is, because they're fed consistent with their evolution as well. I think like that's probably the main thing with most animals is like if you don't have to eat grass finished, but it's always gonna, in my opinion, it's always gonna be better to get the animal that was raised better. You know,
of course, and it matters less with the beef, the fat, even if they're eating. They're not grass finished. They're still going to be pretty low in the PUFA. They'll be a little higher in fat.
Yeah,
but when it comes to the chicken, it matters a lot, or the pork, it matters a lot. So
yeah,
and that's because of just the fact that they have so many different stomachs and
right
with the cows and is it sheep the same or
yeah, sheep are the same.
I really like a high quality grain finished steak over anything, you know. So if it's a Mark and I have a sponsor, Piedmontese beef, and when you get their top end, it's like it's so good, you know.
Yeah.
It's like you can't. So you know, a carnivore diet, you're basically stuck, you know, eating steak all day. But if you have to, for me, if you have to do that, that's like the best thing, you know, to be eating. So I'll just like, you know, smash a couple steaks a day. But I'm thinking that with what you're saying, I can add in some other things. Like if I did add in fruit, and if I did add in spaghetti squash, and if I did add in maybe a potato on my workout days or something like that, how much? You know, am I tracking calories or anything, or what am I doing?
Yeah. So one thing, just to wrap up with the fat, I wanted to mention also things like olive oil, macadamia nut oil, coconut oil, palm oil are all pretty low in the polyunsaturated fats. So those are fine to use too if someone is looking for some extras.
Okay. So yeah, those oils, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, just staying away from any other vegetable oil, really.
So it's just this one particular kind of fat. It seems to almost drive your whole dietary philosophy. Is that right?
From the fat side, I would say that's the central piece. We really want to reduce or avoid the omega-6s and omega-3s. And
what about omega-9? Does that usually not become a problem? Is that not in a lot of things? Or
yeah, you're not going to find omega-9 really in much fat. What actually happens is if you don't eat enough omega-6s and omega-3s, you'll produce omega-9s yourself.
So you just make them.
Yeah.
Yeah, unnecessary then for us to seek them out.
Right. Yeah, that's what I would say. And it might sound like it's a small thing, but there's almost every food that someone's eating, if they're not conscious of it, is pretty high in these omega-6s and 3s. The vegetable oils are everywhere. The chicken and pork fat, all of those things are going to be pretty ubiquitous. I mean, in any packaged food.
So for chicken, is there dark meat over white meat, or
so it'd be chicken breast, the white meat. Yeah,
thighs. You want to avoid the chicken thighs
unless it's pastured. So unless it's not raised on grains and high PUFA. But if you're getting it from a good source, I would say, you know, sure, the chicken.
And that's the harder thing to find. I was saying it's harder to find like the pastured raised chickens, you know, in a normal store.
Right.
Let's go back to the what I was just asking was like food. Like let's just talk food quantity. Like how much protein, how much fat, how much carbs.
Yeah. So I know people like a hard recommendation in terms of numbers, so I'll offer some ranges in terms of macronutrients, then maybe we can dig into why. So on the protein side, normally I would say 15 to 20% of calories from protein. Normally I'd recommend from 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound of protein. This is based on research showing basically maximal protein synthesis and muscle gain from those levels in athletes and in people who are trying to build muscle, where more doesn't seem to help on the protein side. And then as far as fat goes, normally I would say this is a big range, but between 20 and 40%, depending on a couple of things. Normally I'll lean toward the higher end of that range if somebody's more active or if they have more muscle mass. Both of those things are going to use more fat. Normally I'll lean toward the lower end of the range if those things aren't the case. So I'm working with this is just, again, stereotypical, but typical for this population, like a middle-aged woman who's trying to lose some weight. Normally muscle mass is lower, activity levels are lower, and they're not going to need as much fat intake.
Yeah.
That would normally be a case I would lean lower there. And then in terms of carbs, it'd be filling in the rest. So that could be anywhere from 40 to 55% of total calories, 40 to 60%. I mean, it depends on where those other things are.
Now, do you track macros or calories at all, or do you just kind of eat intuitively and let it fall in line?
Personally?
Yeah.
Yeah, I eat intuitively. I haven't tracked those things in a long time.
Like I don't like tracking either. I don't like setting things up that way. So do you actually recommend setting it up so that you learn to eat intuitively, and this is where things usually fall? Is that kind of how it...
Yes, and sometimes, so for somebody, and I'm assuming you've tracked at some point, I'm assuming you have a pretty good idea of the food that you're eating. For somebody who has no idea, they might think they're eating way more protein than they are. or way less than that.
Yeah.
People sometimes will just have absolutely no idea. So I do think using it as a tool just to identify where is your baseline even starting? Where are you at with just a general idea? It doesn't have to be exact. You don't have to weigh your food. It doesn't have to be every day. But I think it can help to at least have a starting place. You don't have to. It depends on where someone's coming from. I mean, if someone is coming from starting at 0, I would say forget it, right? Just focus on changing the foods, and that will go a long way.
Yeah.
If somebody's a little bit farther in and they're wanting to make some more particular adjustments, I would say it can be a little bit more helpful to have a clear idea of at least a general idea of your baseline.
Yeah. Okay. So what's a day look like for you? Like what are you eating in a day, basically?
Yeah. So
and how many times and things like that?
Yeah. So breakfast will normally be, I can just go through an example day.
Yeah,
so breakfast will normally be some combination of eggs and meat. So sometimes I'm doing an omelet, or it's like eggs with beef bacon here, because you can find beef bacon instead of pork here with, you don't have to worry about the PUFA in there. So some combination there with fruit and or fruit juice. That'll be breakfast, and then coffee with some milk. And normally there's sugar.
Now, you had an interesting thing. Every nutrition person I ever speak to tells me to stay away from fruit juice.
Yeah.
Really quick aside, because we're going through a day of eating, but why fruit juice instead of just eating the fruit?
So this is something that also might be more relevant to you specifically with your sensitivity to certain things and doing so much better on carnivore. There's a couple of reasons why I would recommend fruit juice in certain cases. They tend to center around our gut. So if somebody is particularly sensitive to certain things due to bacterial imbalances or difficulty with digestion of certain components, the juice is typically easier to digest than the whole fruit because you don't have a lot of the fiber. Mm-hmm. So if you have a bacterial imbalance, you consume a lot of fiber, it'll feed that growth, it'll cause the production of these toxic components that we absorb. That can trigger autoimmune issues, it can trigger joint pain, it can trigger brain fog, all sorts of things. The whole leaky gut, intestinal permeability, a lot of that is driven by this situation. And so the fruit juice is a way to get the benefits, the carbohydrates, the nutrients, the phytochemicals in the fruit without any of the fiber that can sometimes be problematic. So that's part one. The second part is fresh, ripe, good quality fruit is hard to find in the States, especially year round. The good thing about juice that's pasteurized is it's almost always ripe and really good quality fruit. And that's because they can pick it when it's ripe and then it stays good throughout the whole year.
So it's fine that it's pasteurized and stuff like that. You don't have to get fresh squeezed.
Right. Yeah.
Huh. That actually sounds really good, like meat and eggs and a big glass of orange juice for breakfast.
Oh, sounds amazing. I'm going to ask this is probably going to be like, oh my God, you even asked that question. But you said fresh, ripe fruit's hard to find sometimes seasonally in America. Don't you just let it sit on your counter a little longer? Or is that a different kind of ripe?
It is a different kind of ripe, actually. So that's better than nothing. Sometimes it won't ripen right. Sometimes it's not as good. But when we pick unripe fruit, it still hasn't removed all of its defensive compounds yet. And so some of them will get removed as it ripens. And so like bananas are one of those where it's okay to do that. Although it's better if you can pick them actually ripe. They're going to have a lot less of those irritating compounds in there.
The bananas are always green. They're never ripe.
Right.
Yeah, go to the grocery store. I'm like, do people buy bananas and then like they got to wait a week? I mean, like every time they're so green.
Everyone knows the joke about avocados, right? You can't, you 3 weeks on your counter, hard as a rock, and then you skip a single day, and the next thing you know, it's just a brown pile of mush.
It's disgusting.
That window just goes so fast with avocados.
Yeah, it's weird, man. But the bananas, that always makes me mad. I never buy bananas really because of that. Like they're never ripe; they're always green. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, and like berries, melons, those ones are normally better. But like mangoes, bananas, all those, you can let them ripen on the counter. It's just not as good.
Yeah.
And even then, you still don't have them normally year round, good quality. Depends on where you are.
Let's go through the day of eating still. So some meat and maybe some juice and eggs for breakfast.
Yeah, sometimes whole fruit. Kind of depends on what I have available at the time. And then I'll have coffee with milk. So normally it's like maybe a cup and a half of each. And I'm throwing some maple syrup or sugar in there as well. And then depending on how the day goes, if I'm able to have a lunch on the earlier side.
Maple syrup in the coffee?
Yeah.
Sounds amazing. All right, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah.
I got to try that too.
Yeah. So the good thing about maple syrup versus just plain white sugar is you get some minerals and vitamins, and you also get some polyphenols in there, which
Yeah.
are really
It
beneficial.
has a
for the
nice
gut.
flavor to it too.
And
It's
it is
good.
a nice flavor.
Yeah, the real maple syrup.
Yeah.
Bomb.
Yeah.
Okay, so coffee, maple syrup, and then what we have later on in the day.
So then lunch will, if I have a real long gap between breakfast and lunch because of calls or something, I'll have a snack. Normally a snack might be some cheese and fruit. It might be some potato chips cooked in olive oil. Might be banana chips cooked in coconut oil with those things. But some combination of carbs and fat. It'll just be a little smaller.
Mark and I were talking about they need to come out with potato chips cooked in tallow. Like,
Yeah.
where is that brand? Like, that would be the most amazing, because it's like that it would be so much better, wouldn't it be?
Totally,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, French fries and tallow are the best.
Yeah,
They're-
McDonald's used to do it. Malcolm Gladwell has a whole article on how they used to, use tallow in the fries at McDonald's. It's like the good old days.
Yeah, seriously.
Now it's like they can't do them. Buffalo Wild Wings, they do all their stuff in beef tallow, which is really interesting. So you can get some wings there and not feel bad about it.
Yeah. So Buffalo Wild Wings and Smashburger both used
Smashburger.
They both
Huh.
used to do all of their fries and everything in beef tallow. Now you have to check each location, and I think they're both moving away from it.
That place,
We got to check our location.
our
Man.
location has taken a dive in the last 6 months. I don't know. New management.
They
or
used to
something.
have tallow.
They used to
'cause
be
I asked
clean
them.
there.
Yeah, I think we've boycotted. We've been to our last Buffalo Wild Wings because like we went last time. It was like dirty and it was like
Maybe a
nobody
couple
working.
times in a row now.
Yeah, nobody working there.
Well, part of the biggest issue why these places don't want to do beef tallow fries is because then the vegans and vegetarians can't eat them, so they get so much flack about
For the
that.
fries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The onion, whatever it is, anything that's fried. Yeah.
Also, maybe some Eastern religions as well.
I'm
People-
assuming that's not a huge influence
I'm
here,
trying too hard
but
on that one. I'm trying too hard. I'm sorry. I'll be quiet.
Yeah, I guess that does take a big market. There's probably a lot of people that live on McDonald's French fries. Like literally like live on just like eat those all day. There's
well-
got to be people.
yeah, well, that's because the vegetable oil is cheap now. The
Yeah.
McDonald's French fries, and the story behind vegetable oils is that, back when McDonald's was using tallow for fries, the vegetable oils were used in paint thinner and like industrial things. Then they realized they could use those to fatten up cattle really easily, really cheaply. So then they started using that. Then they realized they could market them to humans as a health food that's heart healthy, and so that's how
They were
we ended up
given
with them.
Oil to cattle,
Yeah, and they still do with grains,
Huh.
but
fatten them up.
Yeah.
That's wild.
and it'll fatten us up too. That's
Yeah, they pump them up with estrogen too. Mark was telling me that at West Side Barbell, where he used to train with all the maniacs, they took some stuff called Hefroid,
okay.
and it's for heifers. It's like a cow steroid for heifers, and it's like a giant blast of estrogen, I guess.
Oh, God.
And he's like, that's when everybody got really strong, and they're taking like a female cow hormone. I love stories like that.
Yeah. But yeah, so they became cheap, and then in the places that are trying to hold out and do beef tallow, then they get the flack from the vegetarians and vegans a lot of times. So
Yeah.
it doesn't last.
So what else? Anything else after that?
Yeah, so snack, some form of carbs and fats, normally the good quality fats and something like fruit or maybe some potato chips, that kind of thing. Lunch will normally be, so what it's typically been these last couple of years since I'm in Latin America, we've got these really great, freshly handmade, nixtamalized corn tortillas. So I'm doing tacos, some sort of meat, cheese, which the cheese is really blasphemous. You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But if you're doing traditional tacos,
Really?
But yeah, the traditional tacos, it's just meat, cilantro, onions, salsa.
No cheese.
No
cheese.
cheese.
You're,
That's an
out, you're off
American
the team.
deal.
No,
Yeah.
like a taqueria, lime on the side.
Yeah, lime, yeah.
Like a real traditional taco. It's
Yeah,
hard
you're
to
off the
find
team.
and unbeatable. No, it's so much better than just your standard like sour cream and guacamole American taco. Seriously.
It's better than Taco Bell.
What a surprise.
Believe it or not.
What a surprise.
Yeah,
No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, we have those real traditional ones in Mexico and all that. They're
Yeah.
amazing. But so I add the cheese on when I'm making it myself. If I get it from the stand down the street, I don't. But, so normally it'll be a couple tacos for lunch, normally with some other form of added carbohydrate on the side, some more of the chips or the fruit or dried fruit. maybe some chocolate in there.
So potato chips, not that bad for you. Like the
Potatoes,
right one, because they're cooked in avocado oil or something.
Yeah,
right?
or olive oil. They used to have the coconut oil ones. You can't find those anymore. But
Yeah.
I would say there's really nothing wrong with those.
Now, what about the Randle Cycle? Because I hear this thing called the Randle Cycle that activates when you eat carbs and fat together, and it's like throwing up the bat signal and saying, don't burn any fat, right? Like it's supposedly the Randle Cycle. When you eat carbs and fat, your body gets confused. When you eat them together, it doesn't know which one to digest, and so it shuts everything down supposedly, and you get real fat. You're saying that you don't think that happens in that way?
Yeah, not at all. And so there's, without digging into the details of the biochemistry, what the Randle cycle is that when a cell is, the mitochondria in the cell are burning carbohydrates, it blocks that cell from taking up fats and using the fats for fuel, and vice versa. So in the
this is every fat guy's escape clause to responsibility of what you're talking about, right? So slow down and make your case. So because fat guy over here has been banking a lot of extra lbs on this whole premise. So please go into this one for us.
Yeah, and what I will say is this doesn't mean that there's no place for low fat or low carb, but at the very least, it's not because of the Randle cycle. So Randle cycle is on the flip side. The other side is if the mitochondria in the cell are burning fat, then that's going to inhibit the uptake and usage of glucose. So one cell really only going to use glucose or fat at a time. Now, that then gets somehow translated to if you eat them at the same time, your body can only use one and store one, has to store the other as fat. But that's not the case. So we have a lot of different tissues. We've got our brain and our muscles and different muscles, liver, kidneys, all sorts of things. They can all be using different fuels at the same time. That doesn't violate anything in terms of the Randle cycle. So you can consume a meal that's fat and carbs. Your brain can take up those carbs. It's super hungry for carbs. It can't use fat as a fuel. It's got to use carbs or ketones. So your brain can use those carbohydrates. Your liver can use those carbohydrates. Your kidneys, your red blood cells will all use those carbohydrates. Your muscles and other tissues can take up the fat and use the fat. There is nothing to be said there that is going to drive fat storage. It's just that, like, our bodies are way more intelligent than only being able to deal with one fuel at a time. There's always fat and carbs in your bloodstream, even if you don't eat, and it doesn't cause an issue. It doesn't cause an issue at certain levels as long as you're using the fuels well. So there's nothing about the Randle cycle that dictates that having those two together will cause a problem. That being said, we of course want to adjust our carb intake or our fat intake based on our needs. And so if somebody is in a situation where they're trying to lose weight, it can help to lower fat intake sometimes. I know I mentioned a couple situations when I would lower fat intake. That can be another, is that there's going to be less fat need because there's already more fat circulating.
Sure.
So you don't need as much fat coming in. And you're not going to be as good at burning the carbohydrates. And so having too much fat can interfere with that. So there are some places where you can have a problem there. As far as decreasing carbs, I think that the benefits there have much less to do with the carbs and fat together causing a problem, but rather, for one, we relieve our digestion of any issues with the carbohydrates, what we were talking about earlier with those fibers. Those can cause major inflammatory issues, autoimmune reactions. We see that endotoxemia in obesity. Like that's a huge piece there, is relieving our gut from any sort of inflammatory cycles. And so removing carbohydrates is a band-aid way to do it. I think there's better ways to do it, but it'll at least do it.
Yeah.
The other thing it'll do is if you're not good at burning carbohydrates, and this is something that happens as we age, as we have more dysfunction, if we're looking at Alzheimer's, if we're looking at obesity, if we're looking at fatty liver disease, any other situation, these are situations where we don't burn those carbohydrates well. And so we can avoid that problem by taking out the carbohydrates. That's better than not burning carbs well and eating carbs. But the best scenario, so the one scenario above that I would try to work on, is improving our ability to burn the carbohydrates so that we don't have to avoid them. And that's actually fixing the problem. So we can say in diabetes, the problem is you're not using the glucose well, you've got high blood sugar, so let's just stop eating carbs.
Yeah.
It's band-aiding the problem, it's better, but instead let's fix our ability to use the carbohydrates, fix our ability to produce energy from them. I would say that's the best option.
Yeah. I think, I think the problem we find with most of these diets is that when people do increase their carbohydrates, they usually just increase how much they eat overall. They just end up, going off the deep end. I think so. Like for me, that's my main problem with carbs. Like I just like them too much, you know. I end up attaching myself too much to them, and so that becomes difficult, you know.
Yeah, well, when I came off my several years of low carb, but maybe a good year of strict keto and cyclical keto and things like and fasting. When I came out of that state, I think a lot of people would have characterized my feelings as sugar addiction or carb addiction or just needing to overeat them and not being able to control myself. That was temporary. So I went through a period of time where I was eating between 400 and 800 grams of carbohydrates a day, and a lot of times closer to that 800 mark. I was eating a ton. I was also pretty active and everything, but I was ravenous after going low carb for a long time. I couldn't get enough. But I did then reach a point where I moved, as my body shifted out of that long-term stress state that it was in, that it had been put in due to the lack of carbs, there was then a much better balance that was reached. And not only was it a situation where I didn't feel drive to overeat, but I felt like I had more control and needed to use less willpower and less restriction than I ever had in my life. So up until that point, I was constantly in this state, which I think a lot of people resonate with, of needing to restrict and use willpower to stick to what I was doing and to not go off and binge, and knowing that if I had a bite of a brownie, it would become 10 brownies, or if I had even just some fruit at one point when I was in keto, it would be a 5-pound bag of frozen fruit. Yeah.
That's what I do. I go like either extreme. It's like I'll go no carbs and then I'll binge on a bunch of carbs, and I'm trying to smooth all that out. So I'm just, pretty normal all around. But that's when I do something more like the meat and fruit diet, it actually allows me to do that a little bit more and have more of a variety. However, I find that I start leaning towards like eating all fruit and then not eating the protein that I need. So that's what happens to me over time. So I can't do meat and fruit that long, or it ends up being fruit and fruit,
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be curious to know how much protein you are getting even when you feel like it's lower, because
probably enough, but I'm crazy like that,
Well, but that's an important piece, is that carbs are protein sparing. So when we don't have enough carbs in and we eat a lot of protein, our bodies convert that extra protein to glucose through gluconeogenesis.
Yeah.
When we have enough carbs that we don't need to use that process, our protein needs go down. So if we're getting enough carbs, it does lower our protein needs. And so I think a lot of people are in that place where they're relying on protein for satiety and feeling.
Protein recommendations are pretty low compared to a lot of other people. Why is that?
Yeah, so 0.6 grams to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So not lean mass, per pound of, I guess you could say, ideal body weight. A lot of that's coming from Menno Henselman's information and research.
He's awesome.
Yeah. And so I think he's got some pretty compelling data that suggests that even the 0.8, that's kind of playing it safe. I think his research really settled on around 0.63.
Like we eat probably too much protein then.
I think
for the
so.
most part.
I think it comes at the cost of getting the carbs that are going to be the things to jack up our metabolism and get our stress hormones down. So coming back to like that feeling of being out of control, I think we can have a situation where we are eating, let's just keep it at meat and fruit, keep it really simple. We're eating a good amount of fruit and we're getting 20% of our calories from protein, let's say, and we're in a good balance and we're not out of control with how much we need because we've actually started to meet those needs, right?
Yeah.
So I used to be in that place of feeling like I needed to restrict and use willpower in order not to go for those binges, to a situation where because I was actually satisfying those physiological needs, I don't feel that anymore. I can have the orange juice and not feel like I'm out of control with it, or feel like it's going to cause any issue. And I've seen that parallel thing happen with clients who basically thought that would never happen, right? So they thought they were the kind of people, and again, I was one of these people, where a spoon of ice cream led to the whole pint or more, you know? And then when they actually got to a point where they were supplying enough carbs throughout the day and enough food, enough nutrition, enough calories throughout the day, and sorting out the issues that were causing dysfunction in terms of energy production, one spoon became one spoon, right? Or it was like, I actually ate part of the ice cream, I ate a third of it, and I put it away. And
I have so much more control now than I've ever had, you know? So some of the things I'm even saying to you, it's like, I don't really have those problems anymore.
Sure.
But it is amazing how that can like come and go, and how strong some of those feelings are. Like when you have a craving, it's like you'll do anything to solve that, that problem, and so I've found myself I've gotten a lot better. I think you can kind of train that. Like I feel like I've gotten a lot better at staying away from things that I need to, stay away from.
Yeah. And I think I think a part of it also is we want to absolve ourselves of that guilt and take away, like, don't get me wrong, there's some amount of willpower involved there, but I think there's more of it is on the physiology, and we're not really recognizing that. We're not recognizing that those cravings aren't because we're bad and our bodies want us to be unhealthy and overweight. That would be a ridiculous notion. Instead, it's that we have a physiological need for these things, and if we try to satisfy that carb need with donuts, something that's going to have a lot of the omega-6s, a lot of things that are going to irritate our gut and create an inflammatory state there, block our ability to produce energy from that food that's coming in, it's not going to turn our signals off. We're going to stay hungry and feel like we can eat 1,000,000 donuts. And I think everybody's had that sort of experience. But if we're satisfying the craving with the nutrition that's actually supportive of producing energy, it'll actually turn the hunger signals off. Yeah. So I think there is actual physiological underpinning for it too that is under-recognized or under-acknowledged.
Have you had good luck getting the word out about this? People listening to you?
Yeah.
You have a podcast, right? It's doing pretty well.
Yeah, so I've got a podcast called the Energy Balance Podcast. And it's really exciting. I think the whole, like, I'm not alone in these views. I think the views are becoming a lot more popular. You mentioned Paul Saladino earlier.
Yeah, well, you're kind of at the head of your own little niche in a way, right? I mean, is there other people doing the similar diet plan and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I'm largely inspired by the work of Dr. Ray Peat. We were talking about him a little bit yesterday.
Yeah, I love Ray Peat. Yeah. Stan Efferding's a big fan of his, always has been.
Yeah, definitely. So there's definitely a good handful of people who are spearheading information that's inspired by these same views. But it's exciting to be spreading it and to see I think a slow shift in the culture away from the keto, pure carnivore, and low carb, and maybe recognizing that we swung from one side to the other.
Yeah, and I always tell people, like Mark and I have said this from the very beginning, all these things are tools. So I feel like carnivore diet's great to like hop on a carnivore diet for a month, just flush out everything, feel really good, whatever, and then you can go right back to whatever you're doing. Like it doesn't seem to hurt at all. It just seems to be a great tool to kind of like fix things and reset. Like I have a lot of autoimmune conditions that seem to be at bay on a carnivore diet, but they also seem at bay when I'm eating sensible and smart too, and I don't overeat and I don't eat a bunch of crap, So I think that that just takes more patience in trying to figure out how to navigate that. But how can people find your work and find you and get in touch with you and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so mentioned the Energy Balance Podcast, which can be found on all podcast platforms. For people who want to dig in a little deeper, get some more practical information related to stress and exercise and nutrition, I have a free mini course that they can find at jfeldmanwellness.com/energy. They can go ahead and sign up there.
Awesome.
And at that site, jfeldmanwellness.com, you can find free articles, links to the podcast, and everything else from there.
I'm going to check it out because I think I need to add some of these things into my diet. And, I think I want to... like I said, I hate being on the same thing all the time, and it gets to be annoying. And I love adding in, some other things and trying new things. So I'll definitely be giving this a shot, as I've given every other plan ever pretty much a shot. And I think like what Mark and I do is tend to grab little things from everybody that comes through here, which is wonderful. We have this place where people come through all the time, give us a bunch of information. We just grab a little from this guy, grab a little from that guy, And I think this was great, man. I look forward to some spaghetti squash and maybe some potato chips, even, Russell.
I can't even go into this. No, actually, though, that's been sort of the last few days. I've been eating a lot more squash with some red meat and squash at night, sometimes some mushrooms. Do you think the tomato sauce just destroys it?
No. I mean, I would get a good quality one, right? I'm not a big fan of the corn syrup and everything, but if it's tomatoes and some spices and sometimes they add a bit of sugar, I don't see any issue with that.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, man. Well, we're out of here. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.